Welcome to the You Are a Philanthropist podcast. Today we're talking with Michelle Valiukenas. Michelle is a dedicated mom, storyteller, and advocate. She and her husband founded the Collette Louise Tisdahl Foundation, whose mission it is to improve outcomes related to pregnancy, childbirth, prematurity, and infancy.
You are the kind of person who wants to improve the lives of others, but you need to take pride in your everyday actions. You Are a Philanthropist believes that every act of goodwill deserves to be recognized as philanthropy. Each individual action you take impacts another's life. Believe that what you do makes a difference. So call yourself a philanthropist and start a ripple effect of generosity that boomerangs back to you. Go to youareaphilanthropist.com/shop. Style your outside to match your inside. Choose a t-shirt, hoodie, or bag to show how much you love giving to others. That's youareaphilanthropist.com/shop.
Hey y'all, I just want to remind you that I need you to subscribe, rate, and review to this podcast. If you're enjoying it and want more conversations like this and want to help people get more involved with philanthropy, please subscribe, rate, and review. I want to thank you to the people who have already rated this podcast 5 stars. Please click to rate it 5 stars. And here is some awesome reviews. I love hearing the different stories from a variety of people's personalities. We all can contribute with the strengths we have in making the world a better place for all of us to live in. Here's another one. I really enjoy this podcast. It's encouraging to see that I don't have to be a multimillionaire who created a philanthropic foundation to impact people. It's my small gifts of my time and resources that add up. I am a philanthropist. And here's another. There are opportunities all around at an early age to remind us to look out for each other. It's a lifelong journey of seeing the opportunities and acting in them. Thanks for a great reminder. Listeners, please do me a favor, subscribe, rate, and review right now so more people can hear more from us and learn more about philanthropy.
Welcome to the You Are a Philanthropist podcast with Jen Klein, a certified fundraising executive and philanthropic entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to empowering and inspiring you to make a difference in your community and our world. Jen believes all acts of kindness matter, and this show is designed to help you take pride in your everyday actions of improving the lives of others and making a change in the world. Now, here's Jen.
Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Michelle, I'm so glad we connected. You do really important work, and I know it's a sad story to share, but also there's so many wonderful things that have come out of your personal pain and journey. So would you share with my listeners about how you started the Collette Louise Tisdahl Foundation?
Sure. So it's created in memory of our daughter, Colette, who died at 9 days old. Our whole journey to parenthood has been fraught, but, in particular with Colette, I was finally pregnant. We made it past scary first trimester. And when I was 21 weeks pregnant, something told me to go to the OB. And I made an extra appointment, which my OB had always said, if you feel something or just want to check in, do it. And when I went, my blood pressure was 188 over 110. So normal is 120 over 80. And so I was sent straight to labor and delivery and was admitted with severe preeclampsia and was told I would be there until I delivered. And so I was 21 weeks pregnant. That was the evening of May 8th. I wasn't due till September 7th. And so very quickly, everything just turned upside down. And after I was in the hospital a day or two, I started thinking about it. And I realized how much privilege I had and how blessed I was that financially we could handle this, right? And our hope was to get to September or very close to it. And I started to realize how lucky we were and how few people could say the same thing in our situation. And so that financial piece really spoke to me. And it was something that was in my mind, and I carried that with me. And ultimately, after 3 weeks of being in the hospital, the doctors recommended delivery. And so Colette was born 16 weeks early, very small, and went straight to the NICU. And in the NICU, I saw the same things. I saw parents who were traveling from far distances to see their kids. I saw, and I was being told the same things of, you may want to go back to work now and save your days until she comes home. And I was just days postpartum, and I couldn't imagine going back to work, nor did I want to, right? I wanted to be with my daughter as much as possible, and I was. And then after 9 days, her body she couldn't handle it anymore, and we lost her. And again, it's very quick decisions you're making about, decisions like no parent should ever have to make about what to do to bury or cremate their child. And, again, that financial piece really stuck out to me. And so that was something I just really carried. And I just kept saying, there's a reason why all of this happened and why this piece really stuck out to me. And so I did my research. I never intended to start a nonprofit. That was not my first inclination. My first inclination was somebody else is doing this and we can just, partner with them maybe, and maybe we have a special scholarship in Colette's name or something of that nature. And what I found out was that nobody was really doing what I had in my head. So, organizations were doing NICU and or loss, but nobody was touching pregnancy. And, it was very geographically focused. It was very specific as to what they covered. And I really wanted to take the advantage to allow every family to share their story and to look at every family and help them the best way we could. And so we launched the foundation in September 2018.
Oh, I gotta take a deep breath. I am so sorry to hear of your loss and so thankful that you shared that with me today. And I just am so appreciative of what you're giving the world because of your loss. And I want to hear more about how your foundation in Colette's name is different from organizations and what makes it special.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few things. I think to my knowledge, and I never want to say this fully and as clearly as, nobody's really touching the high-risk pregnancy and the pregnancy develops complications when it comes to financial support. And I think that that's a really key part of the whole process, right? So let's get people at their first contact where they're having issues. So I think that that's really important. I think the fact that we cover all the way through is really unique. My husband and I review every application on its own merits and, really try to disseminate and look at everybody's story and how we can best help as many families as we possibly can. And so I think that makes us unique. We work very closely with mostly hospital social workers, but we ask for a verification with an application. So whoever's providing that verification, we really work closely with them and, really rely a lot on verification that can tell us a little bit more about the story than a family in crisis might be able to communicate to us. It's a very quick turnaround. So once we have the application, the verification submitted, if they're submitted by Thursday at 5 p.m., we review them that weekend and they get a decision letter by the end of the day, Monday. And then we pay out very quickly. And that was by design of, in these situations, things are moving very quickly, very rapidly. And so we felt like families don't have time to wait weeks or months. They need help now. And so we want to be cognizant of that. And I think those are some of the ways that we do this. I think having had both of us, and more so me, I do the kind of day-to-day, who have direct experience in all three of these areas, right? So the pregnancy that, seems okay and then all of a sudden isn't, or, a NICU stay and then a loss. And, I think that really speaks to a lot of what families, appreciate from us is that, it's looking at somebody who's been in those situations and who gets it, right? And so, yeah, I can't relate specifically because we didn't have exactly the same experiences as the families we have, but we know what it's like. And so we know what it's like to be a parent in those situations. We know what it's like to be pregnant and to not know, what's going to happen next. We know all of that. We know what it's like to grieve and, what life is post losing a child and, what that looks like. And I think all of that really adds to something that makes us stand out, makes us unique.
Where are you located?
Yeah, so I am out of Chicago, but we are a nationwide organization. We've helped in all 50 states at this point. And, that was also another thing that was very important to me was, one of my goals is health equity and, access. And so to me, I didn't think that help should be determined by where you live. So we are nationwide and it's all over the place. There is no one area that needs it more than others, right? This is happening all over the place. This is happening to all levels of income. This is happening to all races and, all of that. And so I think it's really just been something that I'm really proud that we've been able to hit all 50 states and help families.
Absolutely. Yeah, congratulations. And you have started this now 6 years ago, which is a wonderful longevity. And usually I talks about, kind of the positive aspects of philanthropy. But you really had a lot of hardship too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you could share kind of the ups and downs of what it means to create a foundation like this.
Yeah. I will say that, starting it was, I had grief. I was postpartum. I had this, energy that, to mother and I didn't have a baby. And so, for me, it was very healing to turn a lot of those emotions into starting this and, doing that work. And so that was very healing and it still is very healing. We've helped over 2,200 families at this point. That's 2,200 families that, know Colette's name, right? And then when you think about that, and then you think about, all the social workers that we work with that know Colette's name, that's something impactful that would not have happened, honestly, at this point, wouldn't have happened if she had lived, but, definitely was going to happen unless we did something about it. And that's huge. And that's amazing. And all of that. And it's also, I'm still a grieving mom, right? And I'm still parenting after loss. And I'm parenting Colette and I'm parenting my almost 4-year-old. And that's a lot, right? Like, parenthood is a lot. And, you add in all these other factors, it's a lot. And so, striking that balance is tough. Living with the grief and the joy and the pain and, the complete delight and all of that is very tough. There are times and there are cases and things that I'm very triggered, right? So, we'll hear something, Colette was born at 24 weeks, 5 days. 24 weeks is generally, considered viability. So, basically at that point, essentially she had about a 50-50 chance and she didn't survive. But there are babies that do survive and there are babies younger than that survive. And so, sometimes reading those cases is particularly triggering because there is that feeling of like, and not to bemoan, but I don't want this to ever happen to any other family, but, kind of like, why do you get the child that survives? Like, why did you get that percentage? And I got the shitty one, right? And so there is things like that. There are cases that feel, kind of just very viscerally feel much like what happened with us, right? And those can be both really, really good when we see great outcomes come from that and that we get to play a small part in that. And also can be super triggering because it's happening to other people and that's tough. And so, it's the good and the bad. And I think to me, I feel like a lot of the emotion that comes from running the foundation, is very similar to just what life is as a lost parent. And, it's the balancing of the good and the bad and reserving space to know that, those feelings, the so-called good feelings and so-called bad feelings, can coexist and often do. And I think, that's really the hardest part. I think also just mom guilt, right? I mean, this is sort of my way of parenting Colette. And so am I ever going to do enough? No, I'm never going to feel like that. And so how do I manage that so that I don't burn out and that I'm not, a walking zombie, and that I'm not able to show up as the mom I want to show up for my son, my only living child. And that's tough, And so, yeah, it's good and bad. I think at the end of the day, in anything we do, we want the good days and the good moments to, kind of outweigh the bad, or, that we manage it a little bit better. And that's all we can do.
Thank you for sharing your healing story. I appreciate you starting off with saying it was a healing journey. And I can see your compassion, your empathy, your appreciation of the families that you support. And it warms my heart to hear you've blessed over 2,000 families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been crazy how, how much it has grown, and just what a need there was, right? That came from me having these thoughts as we went through our journey, and really recognizing that this was a gap, and this was something that, families were dealing with. And, I'm glad that we can help as much as we can help.
So just because I'm curious, tell me about the technical aspect of starting a foundation, how it became more than just a vision and a dream. What were the steps you had to take?
Yeah, I mean, I did my research, and like I said, I wasn't finding organizations that had done this. And then I went to people, frontline workers. So I went to the social work team at the hospital I had delivered at and said, this is sort of my idea. And like, I need you to tell me if, is this just me coming up with something that's not really needed? Is this needed? How does this work? And what I was finding over and over again when I was having these conversations is that people were bending over backwards to say, like, what can we do to make this work? And, that was really telling me. I mean, I was resistant. I've worked in nonprofits my whole career, and I had always sworn up and down I would never, ever, ever, ever start a nonprofit, right? And then all of a sudden one day you're like faced with this, and kind of the world is looking at you and saying, okay, this is, how many more signs can the universe send you? You need to do this. And it's really scary to do that. And, to sit there and to say, like, am I doing the right thing? I don't know. And so, I think those were the big steps, was that I was taking those initial steps to do that. And then, it's a lot of paperwork, and it's a lot of, trying to find people that are going to be super helpful. I was very lucky that the head of the social work team at our hospital, Janet, who was amazing and received an award last year from us, she read through, I don't know how many drafts of our applications, and, really gave some good feedback and pushed back on, why are you asking this question? And, we went back and forth, and I pushed back on her and said, well, I need to know this information. And, how can we phrase questions that are better, and, helping families in crisis so that we're not overwhelming a family from applying, but that we're getting the whole picture, and we're getting, as much as we need to make decisions. So I think, finding those people that are, in those fields, in the areas that can really, give an opinion is key. And then, I spent probably my first, one of the big wake up calls that I always say is, I thought, we have this great idea, right? I have money. I'm just going to go to a hospital and say, hi, I have money for your patients. So just allow me some access to your patients and, share this stuff. What I found out is, like, hospitals are bureaucracies. They have a lot of red tape. There's a lot of, layers you have to get through to get to the right person. And then you have to have people who, honestly, like, just didn't know if they could trust that what we were saying was what we were going to deliver. And so probably my first year, I really spent, I kind of joked, anybody who was willing to listen, I was willing to talk to, right? And, just setting all of that up and then trying a different path. And really, I think once we started getting some applications and some families funded, I think the trust started building, and then it became easier that it was kind of self-referrals were happening. And so, that's how it is. And so I don't really do a lot of work anymore on getting the word out about our applications. And that has shifted. But I did a lot of that, right? And I thought of community organizations, and I thought about, oh, I can't get in through the hospital. How could I get in through, and so we did a lot of work. Ronald McDonald House here in the Chicago area was really helpful because they spread information. And so they already had that in and they could do that. It's just, and I think, one of the hallmarks of being a really good nonprofit leader is to be creative and to adapt as things go on, right? And so here I had this dream of, I was just going to walk into a hospital and be like, hi, I have this. And, here you go. And then to find out that wasn't, and to have that like door shut in me and be like, okay, well, now I need to figure out other ways to get around it. So, community organizations, associations, the Perinatal Social Work Association was huge in getting out the word. Where can we be listed as a referral? All of those things, I think, is really just, that's the hard work that takes time, right? It was definitely the first year. I would really say it wasn't until 2020 that we really started to see the true need and the true applications coming in. And that is, 2 years later, right? And so that was a lot of work. There were a lot of nights, between starting it and, seeing those things where I wondered if I had made a mistake and if I shouldn't be doing this. I wondered if my efforts would have been better spent on something else, right? And so I had all those things of self-doubt. I had all those things of, I need to make this work. And, I think it's just remaining motivated to do it, and then just really being as creative and flexible as you are, and as you can be, and surrounding yourself with people who are also willing to be that. Yeah.
I love so much about what you're saying. I can listen to some themes in this season, which is people crediting other people. I kind of wrote on LinkedIn, together we can make the dream work. Teamwork makes the dream work,
Right.
And I know that there were people brought into your path that helped you. But I also know, as you said, you kind of had to get out of your comfort zone and just start talking with people and, saying, can we work together? And I really appreciate that. I also identified with you being in the nonprofit world prior to this and saying you'd never start a nonprofit because, as you know and knew, it's very hard to start a nonprofit. And I think some of my listeners out there are curious and have ideas about starting a nonprofit. I want them to know that it is more difficult than people like you make it seem.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it is difficult. And I think, one of the, people will ask me, and I think, people who have been in nonprofit totally hear what I'm saying, and they're like 100% agree. But I think for people who haven't been, they'll say like, why were you so resistant to doing it? And it was a few things, right? I knew the work that was involved. Did I want to do that level of work and consistent work, right? It's very different when it's your own thing versus you work for somebody. So, it's very different. So, did I want to do it? But also, was there a place for us, right? I think that there are areas where there is an oversaturation of nonprofits doing very similar work. And so that was something I didn't want to do. If somebody else was doing it, then I want to support that. I don't necessarily need to start it anew. And that has been something we're very cognizant of, right? We don't run support groups ourselves because there are a lot of other places that are doing it and doing it much better than we can, right? And so instead, what we're saying is we're going to take this one piece and then we're going to like promote everybody else's stuff. And we're going to be this hub that other people can say there and say, oh, okay, you guys aren't doing this, but other places are doing this. So this is where I can find the help. And I think that that's something that, is really important to me, and something that I don't think enough nonprofits are doing, right? Is, we're not competition. And yes, I mean, there is some competition for dollars, all of that. But honestly, if we're all doing what we are best at, we can all work together. And, that's something I think is really powerful, that I think, we really need to spend more time in doing and not duplicating efforts. And that was something that was very cognizant to me. I really wanted to do the research. I really wanted to meet with people and feel like there was a reason to start it, right? And if at any point in that journey, if I had been told, yeah, you know what, we don't really need this because, these other organizations are doing it, I would have stopped, right? And I would have shifted my focus. Would I have still have started a nonprofit? Maybe, but I would have been a different focus. And so those are the things that I think are really like just key is, figuring out, is there a place for this idea? And then how does this work into the landscape that's already there, and doing that.
Yeah. So you kind of segue into my next question, which is what is the next step for listeners? And your advice would be, is there something that is needed in the world that no one else can fill?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, we all have great ideas, right? But, there are organizations that are doing things that I would never touch because it's not my area. It's not my area of interest. It's not my area of expertise. I don't think about things in the same way. And so, it's really doing the research of like what's out there. And then are there still gaps? And there are, right? In all areas, there are still gaps everywhere. It's not to say that somebody can't start it, but, the idea we might have for this might already be taken care of by another organization. Right. And so I'm thinking like, in Chicago, for example, we have, people will say, oh, I want to do something with, at-risk kids to have something to do after school. Right. And we have a really great organization here, After School Matters, that does a lot of work with that. And so, if somebody says something about that to me, I'm like, okay, but have you looked at After School Matters and seen the incredible work that they do? Right. And then have you worked with them? Like maybe there's a gap there of where they're not providing so is it a location they're not providing services in? Is it a type of after school program that you could maybe work with them? I think those kinds of things are really important to be doing that research and doing that contact, because then we're doing more, right? And I think if we, instead of I think we all need to shift our focus from how can I get dollars and how can I get this to how is this serving the end result, right? And whether that be a client, a goal, or whatever, how is that serving the person? And, I work with a bunch of different organizations and they're doing different work and some are doing financial assistance, right? I have partnered with other organizations that are doing financial assistance that may not have, the capacity to fully help a family, but maybe when they partner with us or, partner with a couple of us, they might make up the difference and they might really fully be able to help a family. That's powerful, and the end goal that I always keep in mind is our families being helped, our families, not having to deal with the financial struggle on top of all the other stuff that they're dealing with in these crises.
One of the things that motivates me in the creation of this podcast was the statistic that is just 25% of Americans volunteer everywhere. And so I always like to ask this question, what's the next step for my listeners? Because it does feel like there's some sort of hindrance on getting started, whether it be we have too many ideas in our head, we don't know where to get started. There's a lot of, mental chatter that doesn't need to be there if we just stepped outside of our comfort zone and took action. So I'm so excited about what you're sharing today about how it's easy to take that next step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, it's really just doing it. Right. And, one of the things I think people think is like, oh, if I volunteer, like I'm wedded to these, these days and this schedule and I have to feel obligation. And, there are programs volunteer positions that are a little bit more time commitment and, a longer period of time that they want you to commit for. There are so many organizations that need, one-offs, right? Or organizations that might not even realize that they need something. So, are you a graphic designer, right? Could you go to a local nonprofit and say, I'd like to do, if you ever want to redo a logo or you want to do, some new brochures or something, I'd love to work with you and, offer my services, for free. That's huge, right? Those are things that, sometimes we don't even think of to say like, oh, that would actually be a huge help, right? Are you a tech person? Is there like a way that you could come in and say like, I'd like to work with you and hopefully streamline something to make your lives easier? Is that your forte? Like, doing this. Could your family help, right? There's really great organizations that allow kids to be working, from very young ages, right? And so is that something you guys can do as a family, once a year or one time or once a month, whatever, kind of works for you? Are there things you can do from home, right? All of that stuff, I think it's really just, reaching out and saying, this is what I have to offer. These are my skills. These are my knowledge. This is what I'd like to do. And really, working with a nonprofit to say like, okay, so let's take what, you're doing and let's do something with it.
Absolutely. I'm curious what your vision is for a better world and how, if you could just wave a magic wand, what would you improve today?
If I could wave a magic wand, I would want us to not have to exist, honestly. And whether that be, a couple of different ways I see that is whether that be that we are putting the research into these areas in a very meaningful way so that less incidents are happening. And I think coupled with that, are we taking care of our families, right? And so, we're the only industrialized nation that doesn't have a mandated leave, and, doesn't have paid family leave. And that's a problem. And that's playing out over and over again. We see that constantly with families, right? So we're talking families who are making a good income and then all of a sudden are losing it. So, could we be taking care of our families better? I think we should be. And if that was part of the reason why, we were out of business, I think that would be great.
It's something that sometimes fundraisers talk in fundraising circles about, which is that our goal is to actually be put out of business, like you're talking about, so that we're able to do the mission. And so I totally hear where you're coming from. I'm so thankful you came today and shared your story and were vulnerable and honest. Tell us how my listeners can find your charity.
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is ColetteLouise.com. So Colette is 1L, 2 T's, and Louise.com. And then we're on all of the social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, or X, whatever it is now, LinkedIn and Instagram. And they can find us. And we love to, if it's need of financial assistance, we'd love to talk to you. If it's, you want to be able to give back, we'd love to talk to you. Or if you just want to, let us, talk to us about what's going on and some, knowledge kind of sharing, that's great too.
Michelle, you're amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And I will have those links in the show notes.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you.